William Shakespeare was born in 1564 and is regarded as one of the world's greatest contributors to literature and the English language. He's written over 150 sonnets and 37 confirmed plays. He is basically considered to be the playwright, poet, and actor of the Elizabethan era. And considering that he's so famous and such an important playwright and poet and actor, he has absolutely no college or university experience. Um, he married young, but he spent most of his time away from his family. And in approximately 1594, he was part of an acting group called the Lord Chamberlain's Company of Players. He was also part owner of this group, as well as the Global Theater, which is the largest open air amphitheater, and that opened in 1599. Throughout his career, Shakespeare wrote 37 plays, and many of his works are still being taught and studied to this day. Some of his works are categorized as histories, comedies, tragedies, and comedic tragedies. The complexity of his characters and the stories drew people to his plays, but mostly nobility. For some reason, commoners had something against his plays. One of the known supporters of Shakespeare and his work was Queen Elizabeth I, who was also a huge supporter of literature and the arts. She most likely contributed to his fame, and she was always present at his plays, which took place at the Global Theater until her death. Later on, King James I also supported Shakespeare, and he loved the theater as well, probably just as much as Queen Elizabeth. And he later ordered his Shakespeare's group to be placed under his own patronage and dubbed them the Kingsmen. So some of Shakespeare's great works, or what are considered to be some of his great works, include Romeo and Juliet, Antony and Cleopatra, A Midsummer's Night's Dream, and our current read, Macbeth. I think the reason why some of his plays is considered so important and is studied even to this day is because of the his unique characters, and their stories do tend to transcend time. And each of the characters have their own uniqueness and agendas. His unique writing skill and his wordplay were considered to be ahead of his time. So he was said to have been one of the first writers. Um, and he was one of the first writers to use prose in his writings, where the words just have a certain fluidity to them and a certain rhythm. He also used a wide and extensive vocabulary. And when he couldn't find a word to use to describe what he was trying to say, he would create his own. So he pretty much contributed to about 3,000 words to the English language. A lot of his plays have even turned into movies. And as I mentioned before, they're still being taught, studied. And if you do a Google search, there's just like a lot of information out there about him. He's one of the second most quoted books next to the Bible, so that's pretty interesting. As you'll notice as we continue to read Macbeth, we'll see that a lot of, not only in Macbeth, but in a lot of his other plays, there's a lot of death that surrounds the play and the characters. And one can only think that it might have to do with the time in which he exists, where the Black Plague was, it was very prominent, and people weren't known to live that long. So that could be one of the reasons why his plays kind of are always centered around death. One other thing to mention is that his plays while they can be categorized as historic, they tend to have some sort of political undertone to it. It's certainly it's almost obvious when there are kings and kingdoms at war in his plays. So he tended to write about the things that were relevant for that time, and death was pretty relevant and prominent once again. So it was the simplicity of his plays and the comedies, but when you really get down to it, you realize that a play like Romeo and Juliet, it really isn't. It's not supposed to be romantic. It's more of a tragedy, not a love story. This is why he's so important, because of the uniqueness of his writing, and the tragedy built and centered around it. It just, again, it transcends, and it can be translated in so many different ways through so many different time periods in which it's taught.